Hi, my name is Rebecca from ingvid.com. Sometimes the most basic questions can cause us confusion. Why? Because when you have a question like, where do you live? You need to know which preposition to use to answer the question correctly. So let's look at the board so that you can learn to answer this question correctly and confidently. So, suppose you need to give your address, the actual number where you live, the number of the house. Then you say, I live at 35 Hill Street. Okay? Where do you live? I live at 35 Hill Street. So when you're giving the number with the street name, remember to say at. If you're just asked, which street do you live on? Then you can say, I live on Hill Street. So when you're only giving the name of the street, use the preposition on. Now, just for you to know and remember, there are many words which basically represent the word street. You could have something like street, road, avenue, drive, boulevard. Okay? I live on Hill Street. I live on San Fernando Road. I live on Fairfax Avenue. I live on Riverside Drive. I live on Hollywood Boulevard. Okay? I don't, but hypothetically. Alright? Next, if you're asked, where do you live, as in the city or the country, then you have to use a different preposition. Then you have to use the preposition in. So, where do you live? I live in Los Angeles. I live in California. I live in the US. Okay? So if you're mentioning the city, the state, or the country, then you want to make sure you use in. So I live at 35 Hill Street. I live on Hill Street. I live in Los Angeles. Okay? At, on, in. Here are a few other points that sometimes you need to mention some more detailed information. There also you need to know which preposition to use. So I live at the intersection of Pine and Maple Streets. So you have two streets and you live close by. So you can say I live at the intersection of Pine and Maple Streets. Okay? Or if somebody asks you, which floor do you live on? You can say, I live on the 15th floor. I live on the 6th floor. All right? And last, you might also sometimes need to give this information, and you can say, I live in an apartment. If you're in England, you might say, I live in a flat. You could also say, I live in a house. All right? So these are the three basic prepositions, at, on, and in, that you need to answer the fundamental question, where do you live? Now, to review that, next I'll be giving you a little exercise so you can practice what you've learned. Alright, so we have two people here, Lucas and Sarah, and we're going to ask them, where do you live? And you help me to fill in the blanks and to know how to answer the question. So, Lucas, where do you live? So he says, I live in Miami. Okay? Next one is the 6th floor. So what does he say? I live on the 6th floor. Where do you live? 92 Bird Street. So what does he say? I live at 92 Bird Street. Where do you live? I live in Florida. Kendall Drive. Where do you live? I live on Kendall Drive. Where do you live? An apartment. I live in an apartment. Okay? Now we know all about Lucas. Let's go to Sarah. Sarah, where do you live? 65 Oxford Street. So she says, I live at 65 Oxford Street. Where do you live? London. I live in London. Regent Street. I live on Regent Street. A rented flat. I live in a rented flat. The 10th floor. I live on the 10th floor. And where do you live? She wants to answer England. So she says, I live in England. All right? The only way to learn these is to practice them a lot. Put down information like this and try to see if you can put in the right answers. All right? If you want some more practice, you can also go to our website.